Good evening, everyone. I'm sorry for the delay. There was a technical issue at our end, so I apologize for that, and thank you all of you for your patience. So today briefing is about further learning exam. It is a session for you to understand more about the upcoming further learning exam in Hong Kong on 11th of October this year. Right. So today's session we will cover the following. So we will give you an introduction about the background of all that, and also explain to you what are the further learning options available. We will share with you findings from the Hong Kong pilot further learning exam last year in October, and also we will share with you what kind of supporting materials are available for you to prepare for the exam, and what are the next steps if you are interested in signing up for the further learning exam. So without further ado, I would like to pass the stage to Adrian, who is going to give us an overview about the further learning exam. So Adrian, please.
Thank you, Hong, and welcome everyone to the presentation. My name's Adrian Coy. I chair the Further Learning Exam Panel at ICE. I'm going to be joined this morning by James Ford, who's my Vice Chair on the committee, and on the question and answer session, Tony Thorne will be helping us answer the really difficult questions. Tony is also a member of the panel, and Ellen Ryan, who is the Learning and Assessment Manager at ICE, will be dealing with any process issues in terms of how you access materials and that type of issue. So the further learning exam is one of the options that ICE has available for demonstrating an MEng level of academic attainment or learning for progressing on to the Chartered Professional Review. So to become chartered, you need an MEng level qualification. Some exams in Hong Kong have been assessed to be at BEng level, and so this is one of the options for filling the gap. So there are three options. One, people with a BEng can take an MSc program, which is typically a year of full-time study. They can demonstrate learning through the experiential learning route, and that generally takes 4, 5, 6 years to show that in your experience you've picked up enough to be assessed to be at master's level, or there is the further learning examination. And this is the option that we're going to be talking about today, and which we've been working on for the last 3 years. So on the panel we have a range of both academics who have experience of teaching MEng and developing MEng programs, and people like myself from industry who have practiced civil engineering and management and bring an industry perspective to our discussions. So we have both academic and industry input to the development of the program. So I hope the program that we have put together is something that appeals to you as graduates in the real world, that we understand it from what you're doing in industry and the challenges that you're facing, and we're wanting to make the study material and the exam itself very relevant to the way that you're working currently. So we developed a syllabus for the exam itself, which covers 5 syllabus areas. which align very closely with the attributes that ICE requires at Chartered Professional Review. So some of you will have studied project management, for example, within your companies as part of your training since graduating. And you may not need a lot more knowledge of project management because you've been doing that at work. But there may be other areas on this syllabus where you need further study and to actually really hone your knowledge in various areas. So the first area is on procurement, contracts and project management. You may be familiar with using one particular form of contract, but further study may lead to you understanding contracts more. You may be working as a contractor and not fully appreciate the client end of procurement, for example, and how contracts are procured. Management and leadership, you may not yet be in a leadership position, and learning around leadership will help you prepare for future roles. Project appraisal and financial management, some of you may be doing commercial work as part of your job, but some of you may need to learn more skills, different forms of financial assessment, financial management. Health, safety, welfare and risk assessment is an absolute core skill for all civil engineers. And again, you may be practicing aspects of health and safety, but actually further study will improve the way that you work, as well as preparing for this exam. And again, sustainable development is becoming increasingly important, absolutely fundamental for anyone entering civil engineering or practicing civil engineering now. And so we've developed quite a broad syllabus relating to sustainable development. For each of those modules, we have developed online training material, and you will be able to, once you sign up for the exam, you will be able to access online training material, and Ellen will explain that later. And Hong will be able to give advice when you need it as well. Accompanying those online modules, we do publish a list of books for you to read, a reference list for you to read alongside those modules, and some of those modules point to specific texts for you to read. We are developing a textbook, but unfortunately that won't be published until the summer or late summer, so maybe too late for this exam. But it really complements the online materials and the reference books that we already point to. So it's not absolutely essential, but it will be available in future years. There is a sixth module in effect that we don't cover any training materials for, but we do examine, and I'll explain a little bit more about that. And that is technical subjects. And many of you will be working in different technical disciplines as part of your work. Some of you will be practicing as structural engineers. Some of you may be doing drainage or water management. Some of you will be working on piling projects, heavy civil engineering, foundations, and all of you will have just slightly different technical training, and we will we test that through a separate report, but that again needs to demonstrate learning outcomes, and we need to test those learning outcomes as part of the exam process. So part of the role of the panel is that we have developed helped develop the online materials. We reviewed all of that material and we have reviewed the textbook and reference books. We also develop the exam scenarios, which we will talk about later, and the questions that we set. And we develop guidance for the markers, and we recruit and train markers for every paper that you submit. There are 2 markers assigned. They have guidance to follow in following that, and use a fairly detailed process to try and ensure consistency of marking. One of those markers is likely to be an academic with experience of marking exam papers, and it's likely that one of the markers will be have an industry background, so we'll have an understanding of how the syllabus works in the real world. Those markers will agree a level of your submission, and if there is any disagreement between the markers in terms of pass or fail, then we do have what we call a moderation process, where the panel members just look at those and agree what the final mark shall be. For each of the exams that we have set today, and we've used a pilot process, so we have had 3 pilot exams. The questions for those exams and the scenarios will be available for you to look at as past papers, so you can see what those questions look like. And we also publish for each of those an examiner's report, which looks at how the exam was approached. It picks out good points in the answers, and it picks out areas where candidates didn't do so well in the answers. It gives details of percentage pass rates and those that failed as well. So all that material is available. The scenarios that we choose are real world scenarios, and they vary quite a lot. It's unlikely that it will be a scenario that you will be familiar with, although some of you may be familiar with some of them. As the 3 examples we've had on the pilot, we've had the construction of a refugee camp in Turkey. We've had the construction and operation and maintenance of an infrastructure program on an island off the coast of Africa. And we have had the upgrade of an underground station in London. And that could have been a metro station anywhere in the world, really. It was that sort of a challenge. But the important thing is, if you look at these 5 modules in the syllabus, those modules really can apply to any project anywhere in the world. An understanding of procurement and contracts and how that would impact on the scenario in question, the management and leadership issues that will come up in ensuring that scenario can be delivered, the project appraisal and financial management issues that arise to keep a project on track and make sure that it comes in within budget, the health and safety and welfare risks that arise in delivering a project, and the sustainable development issues that arise in making sure that we protect the environment for future generations, can apply to any project anywhere, and that is the knowledge that we're trying to test. And I think that covers what I wanted to cover in terms of the overview of the exam and the work of the further learning panel. Just let me just check to make sure I've got everything covered that I thought I was going to develop. Yeah, I think I've covered the sort of feedback on the exams. The last exam we had was the Hong Kong pilot in October 2021. We've learned as a panel, we've taken on board comments and feedback from the people who set the exam, the volunteers that sat the exam. We've listened to the markers, and we have an external examiner who is separate from the panel, that looks at the whole process and reviews some of the marking and the decisions that we've made. And we listen to all of those and we learn from them as we go forward. And we've honed the exam on the basis of the 3 pilots. The last exam in Hong Kong was the first one where we had a part 1 exam, which covers the technical aspects and the technical report that the candidates submitted. The guidance on that wasn't as good as we might have made it. And so some candidates who passed the main exam, the part 2 exam, but didn't pass part 1, have had the opportunity to resit that because we felt that the information we provided, the guidance, wasn't as good as it could have been. So we do learn and we do listen to all of the experience of you as candidates and the markers to try and hone it for future exams. So I'm now going to hand over to James. James is a lecturer who is familiar with MEng programs. He's going to talk about learning outcomes and the critical thinking that we expect to see and how that is evaluated in the exam. Over to you, James.
Yeah, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. So yeah, as Tony said, as Adrian said, I'm Deputy Chair of the exam panel and also a lecturer at University College London, and have been involved in the panel for a few years now. I'm going to talk to you about the learning outcomes and the module list a bit. So might be helpful if we just go back to the previous slide that has the topic list, the module lists on it. That'd be good. Yeah. So the sort of traditional route to a professional review, if you like, would be to do a sort of master's level of education. So either a straight MEng program or a BEng plus an MSc. And if you're on one of those accredited programs, it's accredited because they've demonstrated that they've met the Engineering Council learning outcomes. So because we're offering this as a sort of alternative, so this is for people that have done the BEng but not the MSc, we need to assess that you have, during your work experience and through the learning via the modules, that you can demonstrate the same learning outcomes. So they're sort of broken into 6 topics. You can look them up if you like, but what we've done is, as a panel, is an exercise to say, okay, what's the extra learning that's required between BEng and MSc, and then devised this this list of topics that you can see on the screen now, to kind of cover the bases. And the only thing, as Adrian says, that's not covered is the technical learning, which we're very much expecting to come from your work experience and is demonstrated via the technical submission. Everything else is kind of is assessed through the exam itself. Well, I think there's another session coming where we look in more detail at an exam paper, but what you'll see is that it's very much kind of scenario based, and what we're looking for is you to demonstrate learning from each of these topics throughout that exam. And the other thing that we need you to demonstrate is critical thinking. So I suppose you might all of this learning can come either from the modules, or it can come from your work experience. I suppose it would be very difficult if you haven't got any work experience. I think it would be very difficult to pass this exam just by using the modules. In theory, you could not do the modules and have gained all of this knowledge from work experience, and that would be fine. Though of course that would be a very risky approach to take. But the two are meant to kind of complement each other. So we're very much expecting candidates to have gone through the module, done the learning, and also have gained a suitable amount of work experience to supplement that learning. So what do we mean by critical thinking? So this is really, rather than you expressing an opinion, it's about you having informed opinions. So for example, if you were talking about which contract are we going to use, you might say, well, instead of saying I think we should use NEC because I think NEC is better than the others, you're giving a more informed opinion than that. So you're talking about what NEC has been proven to work well in this similar situations elsewhere. It was used on project X or Y, which had similar kind of risks, or it's well known internationally, and so the contractors are more likely to be aware of it, and this kind of thing. So it's about informed opinions, and we're very much looking for you to demonstrate these list of topics, these module topics, throughout your exam. What you won't see is a question on procurement and then a question on management and leadership and then another question on. They will all be kind of scenario-based questions, and your job will be to say, okay, how do I bring in, for this particular bit of the question, how do I bring in something on procurement? How do I bring in something on management and leadership? And you have to identify where the appropriate spaces are to hit these topics. You very much then need to be applying some critical thinking to your answer, and very much be answering the question rather than just talking vaguely about procurement or about management and leadership. You need to be applying it to the project that you've been given. So that's why the module list is the module list. It's because it's allowing us to demonstrate that you've reached the same level of learning through these modules and the work experience as someone who's done a master's program.
Thank you, James. Okay, so moving on to the exam. So it is in 2 parts to meet the requirements of the Engineering Council requirements, which is set out in a document called UK Spec. The exam will be on the 11th of October, but before that, you need to submit a 500-word further learning technical submission together with supporting appendices, and that is to be produced in advance around about 3 weeks before the exam date, or that is by 20th of September 2022. So I'll just explain a little bit more about that report and why it's important, and then we will move on, and James will talk a little bit more about the Part B exam, which will be held on the 11th of October. So the Part A 500-word submission is to assess that technical knowledge and the further learning that you've gained in a technical area that you're working in, and that you are able to apply that knowledge gained. So if we just move on to the next slide. So what we're looking at in that 500-word submission is for you to describe a project, scheme or operation that you've been involved with, and this is very much about your learning, not the learning of the team or your manager. It's about you, and that you can demonstrate a comprehensive knowledge and understanding and application of engineering principles, technologies and processes in analysing and solving complex problems. It's very much about that we are assessing the level of further learning that you've gained, either through academic study or in the workplace. And I'll give you a couple of examples of that. So I did my early graduate training in improving sewerage systems. So I did a lot of drainage studies and drainage design. And at that time, we were starting to develop modeling techniques. Nowadays, it tends to be programs such as micro drainage that you may have used at university, but then when you get into the real world and you start modeling large drainage networks, you learn a lot more, and you may go on an advanced user course on micro drainage. But you may also learn from one of your colleagues that you're working alongside, and you learn from a real world application. And you're able to identify where micro drainage is working well and where it's not working so well. And you understand and you can think through this critical thinking about why you may need to try a different technique to actually just improve your knowledge of that drainage network. You may be working in transport planning or highway or traffic engineering, and you may be using modeling software for doing that, and understanding the shortcomings as well as the advantages of that modeling software is important, and being able to demonstrate that in a real world scenario that you're working on, and that you've overcome some of the problems and that you've made a traffic network better as a result of your own learning and what you've been able to apply in that workplace. You may be working on piling and a foundation of a large building, and understanding how the different piling design processes apply, how you might use both hand calculations and modeling to actually assess the best solution to a particular piling challenge. So each of those will be different for each of you. And what we want you to do is, as well as talking about the project and where you've got your further learning from and how you've applied that further learning and how it's helped you solve a problem on behalf of a client, we want you to give examples of the project where that data might be uncertain, and explain how you've applied further learning to develop the solution, understanding the limitations of the techniques employed. Within the appendices, you might add in some of the calculations. You might add in a modeling output, so the markers can actually see from your 500-word report together with your appendix that you really understand that higher level learning that you've actually achieved through work and through further study. Right, I think that's covered the Part A exam, which you submit by the 20th of September. So we now move on to the Part B exam, which will be on the 11th of October, and James is just going to talk you through the format of that exam.
Yeah, hi. So a couple of things really. So first of all, the exam is, as we've kind of touched on already, the exam is scenario based. So and that's very deliberately done because we didn't want to create an exam where it's just testing your ability to recall knowledge about a subject. So we didn't want to just say, tell us everything you know about contracts, you know. It's very much how do you take the knowledge that you've gained from both the modules and your work experience, how do you apply that in a scenario? So we kind of plonk you into a made up kind of scenario and say, okay, how would you deal with this? How would you apply what you know about contracts to this situation? How would you apply what you know about health and safety to this very specific thing that we're asking you? It's the scenarios are very unlikely to be the type of work that you're familiar with. It might be that you work in you know, metro systems and you get a metro system question, but it's very unlikely. And so the expectation is not that you will be expert in this particular field. Very much the expectation is that you will not be expert in this particular field. And indeed, at no point are we testing technical knowledge about this particular field. It's very much about how do you apply these broader subjects to something. And very much deliberately, part of the test is looking at how do you deal with an unfamiliar situation. So we've put you in this scenario that you have no previous experience of, but you do have previous experience of other civil engineering projects, and you do have the learning that you've gained from the modules and wider work experience. So how do you take that, and you know, how do you deal with being placed into this unfamiliar situation? So you need to demonstrate your learning and through the learning that's applied to the modules, in relation to the modules, the topic list, and bring in some of your kind of previous work experience, and how has that informed your opinion about what you should do in this unfamiliar situation. If you just, you know, reel off everything you know about CDM regulations, or everything you know about quality assurance procedures or something, then you're very unlikely to be successful. You need to be applying it to the question that's been posed. So how do I take what I know and use it in this situation? So the exam format, it's a one-day exam. It's 7 hours with a break for lunch. So you have a full day for the examination, which provides you with enough time to kind of plan, consider the scenario itself. You need to do a bit of a mapping exercise to say, okay, I'm going to cover module 1 and 2 in this question, and I'm going to cover modules 1, 3, and 5 in this question, and I can bring in a bit of module 4 in this question. So you need to kind of plan all of that out. And work out how you're going to demonstrate all of the modules across the exam. And then, you know, sort of time to kind of write your answers and then kind of hone them and improve them. And you have, I think, usually 5 questions. I guess that might be subject to change, but that's the expectation, I think. So 7 hours with a lunch break to answer 5 kind of essay type questions, essentially. So, and I don't think I can share my screen, can I? So I can't give you the example, but I was just going to give you one example from the pilot exam, which was the refugee camp project, and the question was, which of the UN Sustainable Development Goals could this project contribute to? And I just wanted to use this example to highlight that on the face of it, this is a question about sustainability. And so you might think, okay, I'm going to focus on the sustainable development module here. And of course, it is an opportunity to bring a lot of that learning in. But really, the good answers, the better answers, are really thinking about how a lot of these topics interrelate. So how do I encourage sustainable development through my knowledge of contracts, or through what I know about management and leadership? And so you're not just sticking to the kind of obvious topic that might be prominent about that question. You're also trying to show that an awareness that all of these topics kind of interlink and all kind of interact with one another. So hopefully that's clear.
Thanks, James. And just for your benefit as potential candidates, we will be running a further session like this closer to the time of the exam, and we'll give you further tips on how to do the answer planning and prepare and for the exam itself. So we will have a further online training session, just giving some tips on exam technique in relation to this particular exam, and that will probably be around about September time in advance of the exam itself. Ellen, are you able to now just talk through the exam materials and how that is accessed?
Yes, morning everyone, or evening everyone. Thank you for dialing in to attend this briefing event. As Adrian has said, we've been working quite closely with colleagues across the ICE group to support candidates preparing for this exam. One of the things that we've been doing, we've worked with ICE Training to develop a series of online training modules to support candidates in their preparation for the exam. And these have been reviewed by all members of the panel to make sure that the content is related to the exam syllabus. ICE Training have developed a bundle rate for candidates sitting the exam, and the application fee actually includes access to the online material for approximately 18 months, but it also includes your examination application fee, and I'll include the link in the chat on that in a moment. On the ICE website, as Adrian said, we've also put together, we're making available the examination case study scenarios. There's 3 of them on the ICE webpage, and there's also the linked examiner's report that Adrian and the panel members in particular have developed to support candidates going forward for the exam. Adrian's touched on some of these previously, but just to say we've got an examination closing date of the 29th of June when you would need to have applied for the exam. He's also advised you that there is a need to upload your technical submission before the exam day. Prior to that, we also give you the link to the online exam system so that you can test your connections, make sure you can access the information. And then on the day of the exam, we release the examination to you. We're hoping to issue all the results for them to be marked and available with you by 4th of January. And as this is a process of continuous improvement, we'll also circulate you with a short survey seeking your feedback on the exam. This is reviewed by the members of the exam panel, who will then look at it to see if it can all be updated, if we need to make any changes to the system. And that's all I'd like to say at the moment, if that's okay. If you have any questions from the exam, please email our exams team as well. So thank you for listening. Adrian, back to you and Tony and Hong for any questions, I believe.
I think Hong is going to lead the discussion on.
Cool. Yeah. So now I think it's about time to answer some questions from our audience. So we have a Q&A box. So if you have any question about the materials that we cover today or things that we haven't covered about the further learning exam, please type your question on the Q&A box, and we will try our best to answer your questions. There are a few questions already in the Q&A box. The first question is all 5 questions in the Part B of further learning exam compulsory. the candidates need to answer all 5 questions? I believe that is yes. Is that right?
Yes, and some of the questions might even have 2 parts, you know, part A and
Yeah,
part B. So every
right.
element of every question is compulsory.
Yeah. So all of you, please. Please read the questions carefully. Make sure you answer single parts of it, and make sure you arrange your term properly to make sure you can answer all 5 questions. Right. Next question. If I fulfill the master level of learning requirements of other institutions, for example, I/E, and I got the MI/E CN title, do I still need to fulfill the master learning level requirements of ICE if he or she wants to go for the charter professional review? So I think this maybe I try to answer this question because if you already have the MI/E CN title, I think it's very likely that you complete your bachelor degree before 2019, and it looks. Correct me if I'm wrong, speakers, but I understand that if you complete your bachelor degree before 2019, the new requirement, the updated educational based requirement of demonstration of further learning to master level does not apply. So if you got your CN title for MI/E now, it's very likely that you complete your degree before the 2019 cutoff, and therefore the master learning level requirement does not apply to you. Am I correct, speakers? Right.
Sorry, Hong, that's right. Any candidate who graduated before our cutoff date would not need to complete further learning and therefore would not need to sit the further learning exam to top up their BEng honours degree.
Thank you, and I hope I answered your question. So next question, if the next question, if the new further learning study requirement, further learning requirements apply to the same same question. I think we have just answered that. The question is about if the new further learning requirements apply to candidates who graduated before 2018. I think Alan just answered that. The cutoff is 2019. If you finish your bachelor degree in or before 2018, the new requirements of further learning to master level does not apply to you. So next question. If I acquire 2 years of working experience only by the end of July this year, can I still apply for the further learning exam this year in October 2022? Speakers, anyone would like to answer that question, please? Yeah.
That would be, I think we're looking for a minimum of 2 years experience, Hong. So providing candidates have got the experience before we'd have to be clear when they make their application, which is by 29th of June, that they will be coming up to meet this 2 years requirement shortly after that.
If I could just add to that as well, Hong,
Thank you.
I think on the one of my early slides, I popped up a slide of the alternative routes. And so someone who's done a BEng could actually do a full year's study for a master's MSc to actually bring themselves up to that master's level. So that would be a full year of study. And the question is whether over 2 years work experience, you can gain the same level of academic knowledge as you would gain in a full year, full-time study. And I suggest that you'd be pushing it because you do need to be learning alongside work. And it will take 2, 3, 4 years before you can actually get that same level of learning as you would get on an intense 1-year MSc course.
Yeah, thanks.
I would just add, I completely agree with what Adrian said, but I think that the test really is more about what you've been doing during that work experience rather than just how much of it you have, because you're talking about a very broad range of topics that we need to have covered. So if you're going to be ready after 2 years, then you need to have had exposure to quite a diverse range of work that we typically wouldn't expect to see. So I think the answer to the question is yes, but you might find it quite difficult to pass. It's probably
right. I think the audience here want to know because we have a requirement of 2 years of work experience before we can go for the further learning exam. So I think the question here is that when you talk about 2 years work experience, the cut-off term is the term that they make the application or the term that they go for the exam. So for this situation, because they only have because he or she can only accumulate 2 years of experience by end of July. But the time he or she apply for the exam, there's interest that he cannot he cannot accumulate 2 years of work experience. But by the time of the exam, which is in October, he or she will then have 2 years of experience. So I think the question is really where is the cut-off line for the 2 years of work experience?
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Ellen, but I don't think there isn't a cut-off, is there? It's just that we're saying that we think you need at least 2 years, but probably more like 3, maybe even 4 years experience before you're going to be ready for this exam. So you can apply for it at any point, but the question of how likely you are to be successful is a very different question.
Ellen, I think you are muted.
This is just something maybe we need to pick up in the Q&As, Hong. It's just really, and we can raise it with the panel. At the moment, the guidance document says when we validate candidates' applications, we will be validating that they have gained a minimum of 2 years experience. But if we know this experience is to be, say, by the end of July, or by the time they submit their technical submission, then we can work around it. But there will have to be a cut-off in terms of when their 2 years sort of finishes. So if we want, I'll raise it with the panel and we can get a date. But I would have thought it would be by the time they upload their technical submission, which will be 20th of September is when we're asking for it.
Right. So at the moment, I think you can presume that the cutoff is by the time you upload your technical statement, which is in September. Right. The next questions. How many times per year will the exam be organized? Would Ellen like to answer this question, please?
Twice. The plans are to hold it twice a year, once in October and once in the following March. and there are no separate resit exams. So if a candidate sits in October and fails, then the next session would be the one in March if they wanted to make a reapplication.
Right. So the first exam, as you know, is on in October this year, but from next year onwards, there will be 2 sessions per year, one in March and one in October. Okay.
Sorry, can I just add to that a little, Hong? I think what
Please.
we're aiming to do is the October exam will be primarily for Hong Kong candidates. So it will be timed for Hong Kong.
Hong Kong time zone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Whereas the March exam will be aimed primarily at UK candidates, and so the timing of the exam will be UK working hours. So for Hong Kong candidates to sit in March, they may be sitting in the evening rather than during the day. Right.
Yeah. So the March session is very likely in UK working times. So if Hong Kong candidates decided to go for the March session, they should be prepared to work on the exam in the evening or even in the midnight. Okay, so next question. If I have passed the Part A of the Hong Kong pilot exam, could I submit the same technical submission for the upcoming further learning exam? I guess there's a yes. I think so. There's no reason why you cannot submit the technical submission again. But I think I would suggest because the pilot exam is last year on October, and there may be some updates on your technical learning from October to now. So you may want to update your technical submission to make sure it's current, and then submit that for during the upcoming further learning exam in October.
I think I would be I would clarify that a little bit more actually, Hong. If a candidate has passed the Part A, they have demonstrated that they have achieved the further learning standard in that technical area. So I don't think they would have to resubmit. I simply take the Part B. But Ellen, can you just clarify that?
I believe that's what we've put in the guidance document, Adrian. What we've said is that once you pass Part A, that is banked. You don't need to resubmit it again. What you will have to do if you pass Part A but fail Part B, you do have to reset Part B, which is the engineering scenario, the case study element of the exam.
Right. So the answer is that the candidate does not need to resubmit anything at all for the Part A technical submission, because he has passed the Part A session during the pilot exam last year.
Yeah.
No. Right. Okay. Any are exam questions based on Hong Kong for the Hong Kong session? Probably
No.
not. Yeah.
They'll be international, so they could be based anywhere.
Yeah.
And again, comes back to this idea that we want to put you in a situation that you're unfamiliar with, rather than one that you are familiar with.
Right. Thank you.
It may be that in the future we develop a Hong Kong scenario that we put in front of the UK candidates.
I suspect, just because this might be a related question about your knowledge of local codes or laws and things like that. And so if we're giving you a project that's in in Europe somewhere, and we're not expecting you to be familiar with European codes or with laws and things from that country, you can talk about how your local, what you've done locally, you might learn from and apply in that situation. So we're not expecting you to be expert in the laws of every country or the approaches that take in every country. So don't worry too much about where it is. It's just about applying your knowledge of and your experience to this unfamiliar situation.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Adrian. Next question. Do I need to seek the support or supervision from a MICE mentor for further learning exam? What's your view, speakers?
Ellen, I think.
Ellen, you are muted.
There isn't a requirement for candidates to have a mentor to be allowed to sit the exam. Getting a mentor who could work with them on helping them with study for the exam is a good idea, but it's not a requirement.
Right. So it may help you to a mentor may help you to prepare for the exam, but it's not a requirement. May I know, will the online training materials for the module this year same as the training materials for pilot exam last year? Has there been any change on in the online training modules? Are they the same
They're the
materials?
same material, Hong. There's been no change to the online training materials.
Thank you.
But just to say, pilot candidates will no longer have access to the online training material.
That's right. So another question: if I fail, when will the next exam session that I can enroll? So I think I think we answered that before. So if you fail the October session, you can apply for the March session. But the March session very likely will be arranged in UK working time. So the timing of the exam may be a little bit difficult for Hong Kong candidates. But if you want to go for that, you can.
One thing I would add to that, Hong, is our experience from the pilots is that candidates who applied to resit in the next session, who failed one session and then applied and sat it again 6 months later, we found that generally they were likely to fail again. And what we're testing is the level of further learning, and it's whether in that 6 months you can gain sufficient additional learning to take your knowledge up to a level that will allow you to pass. There may be good reason why people failed, that they simply didn't have that required level of knowledge that we're testing. And in many ways, the exam proved itself in that those candidates were simply lacking in some aspects of their academic appreciation of civil engineering, and going away and spending another year or 18 months might be better advice than simply resitting as quickly as you can.
Thank you, Adrian. So I think the real question is that you may need to ask yourself whether you have achieved sufficient further learning in the 5 or 6 months window before you apply for the next session. It may be better off if you wait for a year or not a bit longer to resit the exam. Also, do I need to get a signature for the technical report submission from my supervisor? I don't think you need that because we have no requirements on supervisor for you to go for the further learning exam or the technical submission. Am I correct, Alan?
You're correct, Hong. I think we may have skipped over a question where the candidate was asking about passing the written element but failing the interview. This is different to the Charter Professional Review. There is no interview linked to the further learning exam.
Another question also about work experience. If I if I have 1 year post bachelor degree work experience and 3 years of pre-bachelor degree experience, am I eligible for the further learning exam?
Our guidance says that we're looking for 2 years post-bachelor degree experience.
Right.
What they're talking about here will help them when they apply for the professional review. But for the exam, we were looking for 2 years post-bachelor degree experience.
Right. So
And
the
what-
answer.
I mean, I think what I would add to that is just everyone should just bear in mind that what we're assessing here is the level of academic knowledge. So it isn't just about experience and spending 2 years on site before you did your degree. How much academic learning did you do in that process, and how much academic knowledge did you gain before you went and did your degree? I would be surprised if you actually picked up much. What we're looking for is the gap in what you've learned between finishing a BEng degree and all that you've learned in that BEng degree, and assessing whether you've gained further academic knowledge since completing that degree, which then takes you up to a master's level. So rather than going to do a full-time MSc, that you've learnt sufficient through courses you've been on, reading that you've undertaken, studying online modules, and learning through work, that you've brought yourself up so that you're at the same level of academic knowledge as someone who has done that MSc course and passed the MSc exams. That is the test. It isn't just that you've gained experience, and you need experience to go and do your chartered professional review, but this isn't about your chartered professional review. It's about demonstrating the academic knowledge. Is it a level that will allow you then to go and do your chartered professional review? So it's not just about experience, it's about what you've learned since you did your got your BEng qualification.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Adrian. So I think the answer is no. You need 2 years post-graduation, bachelor degree graduation experience before you apply for the further learning exam. And also from our point of view, your pre-degree work experience may not help you to achieve much on your academic learning. So and that's why we have the rule for 2 years post-graduation experience. Next question, what main differences between the experiential learning and the further learning exam? I think may Ellen respond to this question, please?
Sorry, I was going to pass it to Tony.
Okay.
The reason being
you.
he's on both panels.
Oh, great. Thank you. Tony, would you please advise?
It's what suits your individual experience that you've had since graduation, whether you fit better into the experiential learning scenario or whether you then go on and do the further learning exam. In a way, you're demonstrating the same attributes, but maybe in a slightly different way. Do you want to add anything to that, Ellen?
I think, as Adrian said, one of the main differences is the amount of experience you need, because for experiential learning, you need to be able to produce reflective learning statements, and you can only really do that once you've got the experience to allow you to demonstrate how you've met the learning outcomes. And also the other main difference is the obviously you need to prepare for the exam, but we're hoping that the exam, as Adrian mentioned earlier, also will help you link through better to the attributes that you need to be signed off against at the CPR.
I think there's an expectation of having more years of experience so that you can demonstrate the learning outcomes without the need to study the further learning exam modules. You've covered it all in your work scenarios post-graduation.
I think that point that Tony's just made is bang on. That as well as setting this exam, we're also providing a course of study so that a candidate can actually study the online materials alongside work and fill in the gaps in their knowledge. So they should be able to do the exam at an earlier stage in their experience than if they go purely for the experiential learning. It takes quite a lot of time to build up that experience to meet the experiential learning requirements. And you're probably talking 4 or 5 years experience for experiential learning as a minimum, whereas we're talking about 2 to 3 years for the exam, because we're giving a course of study alongside what you're achieving through work.
Thank you all for your input. Next question: if I get my bachelor degree civil in if I complete my bachelor degree in civil engineering in 2017, does it mean that I do not need to take the further learning exam? I think the update on academic requirements is only effective in 2019. So presumably, if you complete your bachelor degree in 2017, you are not affected by the update of academic requirements. However, I would suggest you also go to the ICE website. We have a course search engine, so you can input your bachelor degree details in the engine and double check whether your bachelor degree is sufficient for you to go for a charter professional review. Any additional feedbacks, Alan?
Just to say that if they started their degree before 1st of July 2015, then they don't need to do further learning. So this is the Hong Kong accredited degrees.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Next question. The further learning exam, the application for further learning exam is through email. So is there any supporting documents required for the application?
They do, Hong. What they need to provide is a copy of their CV. If they're not graduate members of ICE, we're going to need evidence of academic qualifications, and also details of any special requirements the candidates may have. So this can be factored into the online exam day.
Thank you.
And Jessica in the presentation has kindly put up 2 links to web pages. The first link is for the ICU training material, so candidates can see what that bundle of courses looks like. And the second link is to the ICU Further Learning exam page on our website. And that will answer the general questions about what documentation you need to submit. And you'll also get the guidance document for candidates, and all the engineering scenarios are available on that page as well.
Thank you. So there's another question also about if someone gets MI Struck E, for example, MI Struck E C-Eng title, will that enable the candidate to waive the requirements of further learning further learning to master level requirements?
It's something I need to, we just need to double check with the panel, and I'll send Jessica a note once I've got a definitive answer for it. But if it depends, if they're using the exemption route to become MICE, then no. But I just need to double check about if they actually want to become chartered civil engineers and apply for the Chartered Professional Review, then they obviously have to meet those requirements. So I just need to double check, and I'll get an answer to you.
Thank you. So there is a question about the 5 modules. Is each of the 5 modules expected to be asked at least once in a question, rather than the questions will be repeated in one or 2 of the modules? So we have 5 modules and 5 questions. Does it mean that each question is about one of the modules? Any repeated module will be asked?
I think James covered this in his presentation. He may want to add something, but basically the 5 questions relate to scenario. You may have a question, as James covered in his presentation, that seems to suggest it's about sustainable development. But if you were wanting to meet sustainable development targets, UN SDG targets, then you may want to have full management commitment to those UN SDG targets. So you might want to talk about management and leadership. You might want to talk about the overall culture of the organization and how that goes. You may want to talk about the supply chain and getting the supply chain commitment to those UN SDGs. You may want to talk about how that applies to training and development. So you may cover 2 or 3 modules in a question that seems to be about UN SDGs, and as James implied, and as we'll cover in the next session that we do, you need to plan how you're going to cover all of the modules against the questions that are asked. There may not be a question that you look at and think, right, that's the commercial question where I can talk about financial management and project appraisal. There may not be a question that immediately leaps out to be about project appraisal, but you need to cover that in the other questions. So work out how you're actually going to do it. So we don't fit questions to modules. We ask questions and leave the candidate to make sure that they're getting everything, all of the knowledge across the syllabus down in how they answer the questions.
Thank you.
So I just add that that you can cover. It's very likely that you will need to cover a module topic in multiple questions as well. So it's not just that the question is about one topic; it's converse as well. So and we'll talk about it in the next session more, I'm sure. But each of the topics has, as you would imagine, lots of subcategories and subtopics. So it might be that you pick up on a couple of them in this question and a couple of them in that question. Just to clarify, we're not expecting every subtopic to be covered, but all of the kind of main topics need to be covered. Bits of each of the topics need to be covered somewhere. It's likely that they will be covered in multiple questions, not just in one question.
Right. I'm a bit conscious about the time, and then there's still quite a number of questions, so I will go through that a little bit quicker. Next question, will the exam be required handwriting or computer typing? I understand the exam will be held online, so you can you're more than welcome to answer the questions in your through your computer. So there's no handwriting. And is there a requirement on the duration of the MSc program if you want to achieve demonstrate further learning to master level? I think you have to check whether the MSc course is the accredited MSc course of ICE, or you may need to do academic assessment of the MSc program to find out whether that MSc is accredited as a demonstration of further learning to master level. If your MSc course is accredited, then you are correct. You do not need to go after you complete your MSc course. You do not need to go for a further learning exam. And there are questions about individual academic background, bachelor degree. I don't think we can answer all of them here. So
no, if we get them to email the exams email account, Hong will pick them up internally.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, so please email to the exam email account. We will try our best to answer them individually. And next questions. Will the exam be open book? I think yes. I think it's an open book exam. Is that right?
It's open book. There are checks that we do to make sure that you're not copying large sections of text from a prepared answer. So we do checks through the online system. We're testing your knowledge, not your ability to cut and paste.
Yeah, thank you. So it's an open book exam, but please do not copy and paste. Right. What is the passing rate of the pilot exam? Ellen, can you share information on this?
I think for the Hong Kong pilot, it was just over, I think 50%, but for the earlier UK pilot exams, it was higher, but that was because the candidates were different. So the first pilot candidates have been carefully selected to test the system. But I think that's fair, isn't it, Adrian?
Yes, I think the first exam, the first pilot had quite a high pass rate, around about 80%, something like that. It was lower in Hong Kong, but there was the Part A and Part B, so it was very difficult to compare like with like. And what we're finding is that if people take on board the guidance and attend the sort of training sessions that we have, I think that you're organising some workshops perhaps to help people as well. And if you take the advice that James has been talking about planning to make sure that you've got them, you're covering all of the parts of the module, and you do the online training, we hope that the pass rate will increase. We're not here to fail people. We're here to test people's knowledge. So hopefully the pass rate will improve.
Thank you. There's a question about the application fee and the modules and the fee for subscription of module. I think you may go to the Further Learning Exam website webpage, which is shown on the screen. There are information about the fee for the online IC Further Learning Exam. And there's this question. I think this question is can speakers share their observation about the general strengths and weaknesses of the past candidates in the pilot exam?
The examiner's report for each of the pilots does provide that sort of analysis of what strong answers look like and what weaker answers look like. In general terms, the planning is really important in terms of making sure that you have enough time to answer all 5 questions and the parts of the questions. Very often where candidates fail, it's because they ran out of time and their answers to 1 or 2 questions were very, very light. So just because you answer 1 question very thoroughly, you may then run out of time to answer all of the questions. So the strong candidates were able to pace themselves and demonstrate that knowledge right across the syllabus, make sure that they answered each part of the question, and had time to demonstrate that critical thinking in their answers as well. So a lot of it is about exam technique, taking the time to plan how you're going to answer, making sure that you get that knowledge across the syllabus. And if you've got your head full of information and knowledge because you've done the online modules, you've picked up a lot of knowledge through work, and that you do your planning, then it's just a case of getting that down onto paper or onto your laptop and uploaded. And the 7 hours or the 6 hours plus a lunch break will disappear very quickly. So it is about downloading your brain and making sure that you answer the questions. And if you answer the questions and demonstrate knowledge across the syllabus, then you're going to pass. But it's you're comparing this exam, as I've said earlier, to doing a full year's study and doing coursework and doing exams on an MSc program, compared to learning through work and supplementing that with the online modules that we provide and then doing an exam. And it's a similar standard. So people fail MSCs and people will fail this exam if they haven't done the learning.
Thank you, Adrian. I think that's about it. I do not see new questions, and there are a few questions on their personal situation, whether they are eligible for further learning exam. I think we are not going to respond to individual cases here. If you have further questions about your individual eligibility, please contact the further learning exam team by email, or you may get in touch with the with us, the member support office of Hong Kong. We will try to support and answer your individual questions.
Hong, can I just add that one of the questions at the end is asking about what happens next? So having passed the exam, will they still need to apply for career appraisal before getting into the professional review? Yes, they will if they're not following Hong Kong Scheme A training agreement. So there's still a need for them to have their IPD certified before they actually go on to sit or apply for the CPR.
Thank you, Alan. I think that's about it. I'm conscious about the time, so I think we may call this an end. Should all of you have any further question, you are more than welcome to contact the Hong Kong team or the further learning exam team by email. There are 2 links on the screen which are very useful. If you please go to those webpage, and you will find many useful information about ICE further learning exam. So I think we may call it a day. Thanks a lot for the time of Adrian, James, and Tony, and Alan. And thank you everyone for your patience, and apologize for starting the session a little bit late. Good afternoon and good evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
You.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.